Hello, and welcome to Cook County ARPA's monitoring and fiscal training for subrecipient organizations. By the end of this recording, the staff from your organization should understand what the compliance monitoring process looks like for subrecipients. They should understand the fiscal monitoring approach used by Cook County. They should also understand instructions for expense reporting from your organization, as well as the reporting requirements for your organization. Let's first talk about the subrecipient monitoring process. Cook County's compliance monitoring evaluates the outcomes of programs in meeting their goals and complying with federal rules. This process is standardized across all county departments using guides, templates, and trackers that are consistent for all ARPA programs. Compliance monitoring evaluates program performance at the subrecipient level. The process focuses on things like following legal agreements, meeting deadlines, and complying with federal regulations. Cook County is a recipient of federal funds from the U.S. Treasury as part of the American Rescue Plan Act, and it is therefore required to monitor its subrecipients. This is because they are not picked via a competitive process, unlike contractors, and therefore require ongoing monitoring. The county's monitoring process is carried out by its project teams. Those monitoring activities are led by your assigned program lead, although you may interact with other county staff, including fiscal leads or department liaisons who are supporting the program. Monitoring activities occur primarily remotely over video meetings and are supported by written communications and internal project team check-ins. Some program partners may also participate in other activities such as site visits. The compliance monitoring process used by Cook County primarily takes place via meetings that take place monthly to quarterly. This is supported by additional documentation review, such as expense reporting, to understand the details behind fiscal submissions. Every monitoring meeting has an agenda, and it is documented in a notes template to create a paper trail for each program and for its monitoring activities with individual subrecipients. Subrecipient has distinct responsibilities as part of this process. Your organization should expect to attend monitoring meetings with your program contact. You should answer and ask questions to ensure shared understandings of program requirements and expectations. This is also an opportunity to monitor and report timely program expenditures, which your organization will submit to Cook County to detail your program spend. Your organization should be prepared to track and meet deadlines for data reporting, as well as to respond to action items after monitoring meetings take place. Ultimately, the compliance monitoring process is meant to ensure adherence to the legal subrecipient agreement that your organization signs and executes with Cook County. This document provides the foundation for the compliance expectations that will take place throughout the implementation of your American Rescue Plan funded program. Now let's talk about fiscal management standards. There are two distinct methods for subrecipient partners to receive funds from Cook County. The first is via reimbursement. This is when the county pays subrecipient partners for activities that have already taken place, first using funds from the recipient's own bank account. So if your subrecipient organization spends money on its own and then applies for reimbursement, you would only use a set of expense report forms associated with the reimbursement process. There is also an advance payment model in which subrecipients can submit a fund advancement form for 25% to 50% of its fiscal year allocation for a given budget in a program year. Under this model, subrecipient organizations would receive funds in advance from Cook County and then spend those dollars and report on its use of those funds using the same suite of expense report forms that I mentioned earlier. In the case of both of these payment models, subrecipients will submit expense reports that are consistent with their risk assessment results. In other words, the timing and frequency of your expense reporting will be customized based off of the risk profile associated with your dependent program. You can get this information from your program lead. Let's talk about the individual expense report documents, as well as the fund advancement request form that are used for financial reporting with Cook County. The first document that I mentioned, the fund advancement request form, is used to formally request funds from the county before program activities take place. The three expense report forms on the second half of this slide on to the right comprise of an expense summary report, an itemized invoice list report, and a payroll summary report form. These three documents together make up the expense reporting that is due to Cook County every fiscal reporting period. Let's take a closer look at each one of these documents in turn. If you plan to make use of a fund advancement from Cook County, then you will need to use the fund advancement request form. It looks like the document on this slide. Several things to call out in your use of this form. It is a one-page document and therefore does not require a significant amount of detail, but you should make sure that the information that you put into it is correct. The first table at the top of the page will be for your subrecipient details, and it should include your agency's unique entity ID, or UEI. Please note that this is a numeral that has been assigned in your SAM.gov profile, and it replaces the DUNS number that your organization may have used previously for federal reporting. The next table down will include space for the amount of funding requested. And again, this should be between 25 and 50% of the funds that have been allocated to your organization for the fiscal year in which you find yourself. The third table includes a rationale request. Essentially, this is a basis of need explanation that details why your organization is requesting advance funds as opposed to using a reimbursement model. This does not need to be an incredibly significantly long piece of writing, but it should include enough detail so that the county could justify this to an external observer if requested. The next tables down include a subrecipient certification, which your organization should read, followed by a signature that should be filled out by your chief financial officer or equivalent position, as well as a date of signature. So you should include a name, signature, and date of signature. There is a built-in signature tool in the PDF forms that are used for this expense reporting. Your program lead can provide additional details if you have difficulty navigating this document. The final table at the bottom of the fund advance request form is for exclusive use by Cook County departments only. Now let's start taking a look at the actual expense report forms that you will use in each fiscal reporting period. The first form for you to be aware of is entitled the Expense Summary Report. And this should provide a high-level overview of all program spend that takes place in a given reporting window. Similarly to the fund advancement request form, it includes a table for subrecipient details, which should match the details used on all of your forms, including project title, subrecipient name, unique entity ID, occurrence period, subrecipient address, agreement term, and date submitted. Out of those fields that I just listed, the date submitted will change from form to form, as will the occurrence period covered. Other fields, such as the subrecipient name, the unique entity ID, agreement term, and subrecipient address, will only change in unique circumstances, such as a legal name change or a move. The next table down will include a budget category column, which should match the approved budget for your program in the given year in which you are reporting. It will include columns for approved budget, including and then followed by activity balance, expended amount, and residual balance. Let's zoom in and take a closer look and see what this looks like. As an example, let's say that your program has been assigned 3 different budget categories: payroll, marketing, and supplies. Let's take a cartoon program budget of $100 in each category. Your approved budget for this program year will be $300. You have been approved $100 in each of those 3 categories. Your second column, approved budget, will not change from report to report unless you receive an increase in budget. Your activity balance, the third column over, however, will change. This shows the amount of funding that you have to work with at the period that you are reporting from. So let's say that this is your very first expense summary report to Cook County. Your approved budget is $100 in each category. Your activity balance, because you have not reported any spend to this point, is also $100 in each category. Let's say that this is your very first expense report to Cook County and you spend $20 in each category. That would leave you in your final column with a residual balance of $80. The relationship from one expense summary report to the next is critical because your old residual balance will become your new activity balance. So let's take as a continued example, if my second expense summary report were to be submitted to Cook County, my old residual balance with $80 in each category would become my new activity balance. So if I expended $20 in each category a second time, my new residual in report 2 would be $60 in each category. Near the bottom of this screen, you will see that there's an additional blue table for advanced drawdown details. This would only be used if you have received advance dollars from Cook County, which you are now reporting on. So if you have received $150 out of your $300 budget, that would be 50%, which is the upper ceiling of the amount of advance funds that you could receive in a given period. The total expenditures reported to date would be $60, matching your expended amount at the bottom of that column, second from the right. The total outstanding advance to date field at the bottom would show how much remaining advance funding you have left to use. Let's look at the two adjacent expense report forms. Following our expense summary report form is the itemized invoicing report. This will be used for all non-payroll activities, anything from an Amazon invoice to a subcontractor invoice. You will collect and report several pieces of information: the vendor name, the budget category that your spending corresponds to, the invoice date, check number that you use to pay a certain encumbrance, an invoice amount, and a requested amount. The only times when an invoice amount and a requested amount will differ would be if you are requesting a subset of the total amount represented on an invoice. So as an example, let's say you purchase printer paper that is for use across your office in 2 different grant programs. If you spend 50% of the paper budget for your ARPA program, then you would only request 50% of the amount that is listed on the invoice. Third and final expense report form for you to use is entitled the Payroll Summary Report. As the name suggests, this is used for payroll exclusive spend. This is inclusive of fringe benefits as well as the main salaries that you accrue for any employees who are grant focused. The information that you need to report to Cook County on this form include your employee's name and title, as well as their gross, in other words, total wages for that pay period. Again, inclusive of benefits. In column B, you would track the percentage of hours that that employee works on this particular ARPA program. If they are 100% dedicated, then you would request 100% of the funds. If they are 50% dedicated, then you would only request 50% of the gross wages paid in this pay period. In column C, we multiply columns A times B to show the total amount of funding that you are either requesting for reimbursement or reporting as part of your use of advance dollars. Every subrecipient organization should accompany their expense reporting with additional backup documentation to show the detail that any outside parties may wish to see that would be associated with your expense reports. Subrecipients must maintain this backup documentation for all expense reports for the duration of their program through the end of 2031. All reported costs must be backed up by 2 types of documentation. The first is expense documentation. One example of this would be an invoice, which is by far the most common type of documentation used to show expense documentation. This essentially shows the expense incurred. This is due with each expense report that you submit to Cook County. The second piece of documentation that you are required to eventually submit to Cook County, as well as to maintain for your internal records, is proof of payment. The most common example of proof of payment documentation would be a bank statement. Please refer to your annual risk assessment letter for a schedule of the expense reports and backup documentation that you are required to provide to Cook County. As one example of providing expense reporting as well as the required backup documentation would be, again, for a purchase of printer paper. Let's say that this purchase is 100% ARPA allocated and it is categorized under materials and supplies. My first step would be to summarize the spending using the expense summary form and my invoice report. Because this is non-payroll related, I would not put this onto my payroll information sheet. My second step would be to collect the appropriate backup documentation. Let's say that I only need to submit an expense documentation at this time, and so I will submit a receipt for paper. In other words, I will show the invoice for my expense. I might also have a monthly bank statement that I'm not at this point required to submit to my project team, but I will be required to submit that by program end. As a subrecipient organization, I might elect to provide both types of program backup documentation to my project team contacts at the same time for the ease of administrative burden. If you have any questions on the use of these expense report documentation or the compliance monitoring process generally, please reach out to your assigned program lead, and they can get you any additional information that you need within Cook County. Thank you for your time and attention. We appreciate your attendance and for your attention during this recording.